Were there any facilitator books except for just the main book for this? Because I could not find it, and I emailed, but I didn't get an email back.
Oh,
Like with the Kai Mitzvah, we used to get those supplemental booklets.
no, it's in the back of that.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I'm going to start. As you know, I'm Nina Walden. Welcome to the first Chai Mitzvah Mussar topic webinar of the year. We're going to hold 12 topic webinars with helpful tips on leading the study sessions. This webinar is going to focus on the first topic, which is wisdom, Chochma. And those of you who are participating in the webinar, but also lead teen groups, well, that's not nobody here like that. But anyway, we have separate ones for the teen leaders, and everyone's welcome. You don't have to be a leader of a group. So Susan, I'm really glad you're here. Welcome, and thank you for being part of it. We're going to go through an overview of the Mussar program, discuss the topic, interesting ways to bring the topic to life, and there are some supplemental materials I'm going to also share with you. Okay, this is nice. Hold on. Okay, so we'll start out with the agenda. I'm going to talk a little bit about the program, a little bit about the topics and the themes. I'm also going to talk a little bit for facilitators just because it's the first one. But as I said, these webinars are for anyone who's interested. But Phyllis, you're a facilitator, right?
Excuse me?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So here are the things facilitators need to do. First of all, make sure all the participants in your group register. It's necessary in order for them to receive the Chai Mitzvah bonuses like supplemental materials every month, the Chai Mitzvah newsletter, and of course a JNF tree certificate when we plant a tree at the end of the year. Next, order the materials. You did this last year, so you know, but for those who tune in later, it's easy to do it on the website. Usually the facilitator orders for everyone and they pay the person back. That way it's efficient and it saves on shipping costs. And Susan, if you decide that you like the Mussar and you'd like to do it virtually, you can order materials on our website. Okay, and you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Good, okay. Okay, and an ongoing responsibility is to help your group participants choose independent projects and encourage them to carry through with their commitments. They can be very small or whatever feels good to them. We'll go over that later. And lastly, the group facilitator should lead the group in choosing dates for the meetings. You can schedule them all at the beginning of the year, or you can schedule as you go. My group scheduled as we went because, you know, things happen and people wanted to pick the date that was best. You'll do however it works for you. So we were talking about independent projects. As you know, Chai Mitzvah participants are reaffirming their Jewish identity and their commitment to the Jewish people through study, social action, and ritual, thereby acknowledging new stages of their Jewish lives, because today we're talking about new stages. This personal reflection booklet that you see here can be found in the older sourcebook packets. The newer ones have the questions that help focus the participants on their projects on the back. Whichever way you do, the questions are included in one place or the other. So for the independent study, they're just going to look into, or you, Susan, will look into a topic that you want to know more about. A lot of people want to learn Hebrew, or they want to learn to read Torah. I had someone who wanted to read every Philip Roth book. There was someone who was concentrating on every Jewish superhero, because they were mostly made by Jewish people. So it can be anything. For social action, again, you can commit to something for the year. It can be small or it can be large. If you bring canned goods to your synagogue for a food bank, that counts. You know, whatever, or you can do something more. It's up to you. And for ritual, to take on a deepen a ritual, if you sit in a sukkah, that's doing it. Or if you start lighting Shabbat candles, or anything you want to do, just something that's the right size for you to do. And then the questions you're going to find to help focus the participants on their projects. One is, what choices have you made for your independent study, social action, and ritual, because this is the beginning of the year. And then a more personal question, what inspired you to make these choices? That's what the question will be this month. Next month, there'll be different questions. Are there any questions about the projects?
Nope.
Okay, good. We'll get you your thing by 10. Okay. All right. So let's look into our topic We're going to study wisdom or Chochma this time. And I'll start with a little background. So the materials for the Mussar program offers an opportunity to explore the Jewish spiritual practice of character development called Mussar by emphasizing a different midah or virtue every session. So Mussar literature emphasizing character development as a means to emulating God has spanned centuries, but it became a movement with actual practices for cultivating character under the leadership of Rabbi Israel Salanter during the 1800s. And so this month, the character trait we're going to study is wisdom, or chokhmah in Hebrew. And the themes of the different texts we're going to study: wisdom can be achieved by learning from every experience. And every midah, every virtue, can be measured in a spectrum. It's important to be balanced, not too much or too little of each character trait. The one that I think is easier to demonstrate this with is generosity. You want to be right in the middle. You don't want to give away everything, and you don't want to be stingy. You want to be in the middle. And that's true of every character trait. And so, while Judaism emphasizes Torah learning, it also values wisdom that comes from life experience. True wisdom is not only learned from books, it derives from applied Torah, from our ability to truly live out Torah values in our own lives. So the Mussar movement came to be in part because Rabbi Israel Salanter, that I was just telling you about, he was concerned that yeshivot of his time were turning out Torah scholars who had no menschlichkeit. They didn't have good, decent character. They knew a lot, but they weren't really doing it. So he wanted Torah learning to be applied to character development so that students might become wise and compassionate as well as learned. So Chai Mitzvah, we every month have a theme. So our Mussar this month is wisdom, and our standard is rites of passage. So we put them together this month because we can learn from every experience in our lives. And let's look at our first text. Who is wise? Okay, so Ben Zoma says, who is wise? One who learns from every person. Let's think about this. So first of all, a little background on Pirkei Avot. It's sometimes considered an early Mussar text. It's a compilation of the ethical teachings and wise maxims of the Mishnaic period rabbis. So Ben Zoma is expanding the typical emphasis on Torah learning to remind us that learning and deep wisdom don't only come from the Torah. They come from applying it, but also that every person can be your teacher if we open ourselves to the lesson. So the first thing for us to think about, as you consider your own life, who are the people who've influenced you and what have you learned from them? So this is a good conversation starter. I am not a person who's very influenced by people. I tend not to be. But as I thought of this, I thought, well, my mother, and that may be true of you as well. And some of my students, actually. So this is something you might want to chime in here, or if not, something you'll want to think about. Anybody want to chime in here?
My friends, best friends that I have.
That's really good. That's nice.
I think my kids are who influence me, because I have to influence them, and the things they do influence me.
So funny that you said that, because just before you said that, I was thinking, especially my oldest daughter. You're right. I mean, all my kids for sure, and in different ways, each of them, actually. You're right.
And actually, my granddaughter, who's 17, has been doing things with a different generation, a totally different way of looking at things, and it's really changing the way I'm thinking. So it really makes a difference.
That's so interesting. And that's so nice, too, that we can look at younger people and we can admire them and learn from them. So a lot of times, I think in the past, older people have been more like, these young people don't know anything. But I think you're right, and I think that's really good. So also, extrapolating from Ben Zoma's statement about learning from people, we can assume that experiences can also be great teachers. What experience has been most influential thus far in your life? What specifically have those experiences taught you? So I think that it depends how you feel, what your mood when you're asked this question, and where you are in your life. Because if someone had asked me this 20 years ago, the answer would have been very different from what the answer is now. Wow. And what have they taught us? So I think that one of the things that's really interesting is how what you do affects what happens to you. And I think maybe one of the things my experience have taught me is that I need to take responsibility and not wait for things to happen. That's my answer to this question. Anybody else want to give an answer?
I think the experience that was very influential in my life was a Peace Corps. When I joined the Peace Corps, and I actually learned that it's good not to take for granted things that you become accustomed to, and realize, that work. I mean, when you're in a different country and a different culture, that things are not as they seem. There's a lot beneath the surface.
Wow. That must have been an experience. That's amazing. How long ago did you do Peace Corps? Like what era was it? The 60s?
70s.
70s. Awesome. That's
I was
amazing.
in my 30s.
Wow. Wow.
Now I'm in my 70s.
Now I'm in my 60s.
Me too. In between.
That is awesome. That must have been really something. I mean, to be in your 30s and to pick yourself up and join the Peace Corps, that has to be really character. That's amazing. So there are some other things that relate to this quote, who is wise. So there were some other quotes from Ben Zoma. They don't specifically talk about wisdom, but I wanted to read them to you because they are part of the same thing. Who is strong? He who controls his impulses. As it is stated in Proverbs, better one who is slow to anger than one with might, one who rules his spirit than the captor of a city. It's very interesting, especially in light of what goes on nowadays in our news. Even this thing with Serena Williams, like, I don't know. Anyway, who is rich? He who is happy with what he has. As is stated in Psalms, if you eat of the toil of your hands, fortunate are you, and good is to you. Fortunate are you in this world, and good is to you in the world to come. So that kind of like is about taking on the responsibility, I think, also. And who is honored? He who honors everyone. As it is stated in Samuel 1, for to those who honor me, I accord honor. Those who scorn me shall be demeaned. Again, I feel like what you put out into the world is what you get back. And I really like that, what you said, Phyllis, about your...
I think the key,
Are you able to hear okay?
Yeah, you froze for a minute there.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Anyway, so I was saying that it's wonderful that you learn from your granddaughter, because I think honoring and respecting everyone who deserves respect is part of what gets respect back to you.
Absolutely.
Yes, I think that's a good point. Okay, I love this because it's just kind of funny. Rabbi Yochanan said, even if the Torah had not been given, we would nonetheless have learned modesty from the cat, and that stealing is objectionable from the ant, and fidelity from the dove, and appeasement in marriage from the rooster. So this text points out that we can learn not only from experiences, but from observation of the world around us. And it's a Talmudic text, and it reiterates the idea that wisdom can come from sources other than Torah, like animals whose midot we might learn through careful observation. So every experience of our lives is part of our spiritual curriculum, an opportunity to develop our character and to grow spiritually.
Can you send that to us? That's adorable. I would love to use that in the beginning of my class this month.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it too.
That's really good.
I just had a good time with it. And so think about something you've learned from your observations of animals or plant life or natural phenomenon. And so I worked for JNF. I worked for the JNF education department for a lot of years, and I used to go to schools and do programs for kids. So a couple of examples of this, I would say to the kids, who here is 4 feet tall? And, somebody would stand up and I'd say, okay, look at this. This is 4 feet. What is the tallest tree in the world? It's a redwood tree. How tall are they? Like several stories high. Their roots are no more than 4 feet tall. How do they stand up? And the answer is that the redwood trees, their roots don't go straight. The redwood trees, their roots interlock with each other. They go this way and they hold each other up. So that's something we can learn from nature. Or there's another one I used to do a lot too. I love this quote from Arthur Waskow, who is an interesting rabbi. He said, "We breathe and the trees breathe. We breathe in what the trees breathe out. So we breathe each other into existence, and the breath goes in a cycle." And to me, that shows how everything is dependent on everything else. And as you said, Susan, don't take anything for granted, you know. So those are some examples of how we can learn from nature. And you might think of more. And then because we're also thinking about rites of passage this month, so what midot or virtues can you think are imparted by different rites of passage? Birth, bar bat mitzvah, conversion, marriage, death, mourning, or even I've been thinking about not Jewish rites of passage, but just rites of passage in general. So those are things you might want to think about.
Say we lost Susan.
I have something in the oven that I have to check.
That's okay.
That's good. That's really good. Go ahead. No, that's great. So, we can think about what virtues have been imparted through our transformative experiences in general. And sometimes they're like not where you expect them, I think. Like everyone expects to be changed by marriage, but not everyone expects to be changed by maybe starting a new job or, something that's less traditionally a rite of passage.
Right.
So that's something we might want to talk about also with our groups. Okay, I really like this one. Silence is a fence for wisdom. Okay, so this is from Pirkei Avot. And Rabbi Akiva says, silence is a fence for wisdom. How can silence be a fence for wisdom? So when I first read this, I completely could not understand what this meant. Silence is a fence for wisdom. But then I realized that for actually means around. And you could think of silence as a fence that protects wisdom. And then it made sense to me. The kind of silence Rabbi Akiva is referring to is listening. So this thing I love, when my daughter was in 2nd grade, they were learning to keyboard. And she came to me and she said, silent and listen are made of the same letters. Very deep thought for a 7-year-old. But we need to think about this because listening is important and we need to listen before we speak. And people can be silent for all kinds of reasons, not all of which will lead to wisdom. So my question to you, what kind of silence do you think the rabbis were referring to? So
sometimes you're just contemplating something. If you hear something, you have to really think over what it is that you heard and how you can use it.
Right. A lot of times people are not really listening when someone else speaks. They're just thinking about what they're going to say next. And this is the kind of silence where you're absorbing. And
that's one thing we found in our group is when somebody shares something, you wait a few minutes before you add a comment to it because you need to absorb what they said and have them make sure that they're done and then really think about what they said before you comment.
Right. It's really true. And it's interesting. When I've had this discussion before, people have said also, people are so distracted by social media and other things that are going on. They're always multitasking. And maybe the silence is trying to just concentrate on one thing at a time also. But then, and it's a good opportunity to discuss deep listening, where people put ego out of the way and just listen. And sometimes that's hard if the person's talking about something that you feel responsible for, but try to listen without your ego in it. Just listen as if it's someone else.
Well, people always want to try to fix something instead of somebody shares something and then, well, when I did that, let me tell you how I fixed it, and
Right.
you're just sharing. You don't want to hear that.
Yeah. Sometimes you just want someone to say, oh yeah, I know how you feel. That's enough.
Actually, silence respects the other person if you don't say anything. Interrupt them.
You're right. Silence respects the other person completely. And it's funny though also because I talked about this with the teen educators, and they said that silence might also be interpreted as standing idly by, and then it would not be a fence for wisdom. So there are a lot of really positive merits to silence, but they have to be like concentrated silence because you're paying attention, not just like, I'm going to be quiet because I'm thinking about something else completely. So that's an interesting thing. And then building on this, really listen. So there are two more texts and they kind of relate to each other. So I'm going to read both of them before we discuss. A wise man hears one word and understands two, the Jewish proverb. And the highest form of wisdom is kindness, and that's from the Talmud. So a little background about this Talmud. We always talk about the Talmud, but we don't often explain exactly what it is. So I thought I'd just kind of jump in here. The Talmud is a body of Jewish civil and ceremonial laws. It's made up of the Mishnah and the Gemara. And there are two versions of the Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud, which is from the 5th century, but includes earlier material, and the older Talmud, which is referred to as the Palestinian or Jerusalem Talmud. So now that we've looked at these two texts, let's think about listening, like how you really listen to someone. A wise man hears one word and understands two because he's listening and like absorbing and thinking. And reading nonverbal cues and hearing beneath the surface. Like you said, Phyllis, sometimes people they don't want you to fix it. And if you're listening and reading verbal cues, okay, this person just needs to put it out there.
Right.
That's real listening. And in what ways do you listen with compassion and patience? That's a question. Sometimes it's very hard when you have compassion because you want to fix it. No?
Yeah. I like that question for the group. What ways do you listen in passion?
Be right back.
Okay. I hope we get to taste some of this, whatever it is she's cooking.
Yeah, really, I just finished my plain bagel.
I have had 3 cups of coffee. I'm doing well. I mean, here it's noon, so I think
Yeah,
I'll have some.
Once I get to work, I'm not going to have time for lunch, so I had to do something.
Yeah. Well, I'll try to talk before you have to leave for work. So, okay, so this is.
So these slides that you're showing here, do we have access to any of these? That's what I was talking about. Do we have access to any of these?
I can send you, I'll make sure when I send out a follow-up email, I'll send you a PDF of this as well.
That would be great. That would be great.
Yeah,
Because that really helps to lead the group. And every month we have somebody else lead the group. There's 12 of us, so everybody at the beginning of the year assigns a month. And so the first month I always start. And then I fill in if somebody can't do it or if they back out. But somebody else will lead each month. So if we had these kind of slides, it would be fabulous.
Oh, fantastic. I'll be happy to send them to you. No problem. It's great. Yeah, and sometimes I'll send, like yesterday I was doing rites of passage, and turn was in there, and being old, I sent out the birds doing it because I just like that.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, so if there are other things like that, I'll send them too.
Thank you.
I think the tone of the response and the way that that you respond after you listen is what really determines whether you've been kind and compassionate. How you actually respond and what kind of tone and the nonverbal part.
You're absolutely right. It's like we're talking about listening and we're also talking about other nonverbal things. And you're right. Like you can tell when you speak to someone if they're listening to you and how they're listening to you. And I think that's really important. So building on that, the next text is from King Solomon. He was known for his wisdom, his wealth, his writings. He ruled over a large kingdom that had borders from the Euphrates River in the north to Egypt in the south. And he's most known, of course, for building the temple in Jerusalem. He said, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. So what does that mean to you? One question that's put with this is what or who do you look to discern the right path when you're facing difficult decisions? Do you turn to God, to a mentor, to a friend? But another thing we were talking about in terms of Mussar, you might look to text or to Torah learning. I don't know. I might turn to God. I don't really, I would certainly get advice from my friends, but I'm not sure that that's all. I think you need a few different advices.
I think it depends on what you're trying to decide, because some friends, if you give them a difficult decision, they want to make the answer and solve the problem and the decision for you. And they get upset if you say, well, all I want is your opinion. I don't necessarily want to follow what you said. Then they say, well, why do you ask me if you don't want me to tell you how to do it? So those kind of situations, you need to turn inward more than to a friend, depending on what decision.
Yeah,
I think
you
you're
have to
right.
trust your intuition. I think it turns
That's a
to
good
your
point
intuition.
too. Yeah, sometimes you can't make it verbal. Sometimes you do have intuition and it tells you something. It's still hard though, because that's like one part of it. I always tell my kids though, when they ask me for advice, they're grown-ups. So I say, this is my opinion, but don't do it just because I said it.
Right.
So that's an important thing too. So it's interesting to think about though, because wisdom does come from a lot of sources, and in the end, we're the ones who have to decide what works for us. Now, these are some really nice things. There are practices that are at the end of every Mussar booklet to help build this trait throughout the month until the next time. So one of them is learn and list. So learn from every person, like Pirkei Avot suggests. Notice what you can learn from the small actions of others every day, and make a list to share at the next session when everybody talks. Here's another one. Put Talmud to the test. So the Talmud text that we talked about, by contemplating at least one of the following things in the natural world. Think about a cloud or a blade of grass or a body of water, a breeze, a spider, a bird, precipitation, which we've had a really lot of this summer.
We haven't had any.
I'm still looking forward to going out to California where
we need the rain really badly.
I was there. It rained one day when I was there. Anyway, in a horizon, a tree, like we were talking about before, anything. And journal about what you discerned through this observation. I have one here, just an acronym, like if you look at the sun and you can say, shine mitzvot on the world, unleash your creativity and new light every day. Like really, it can be an inspiration for some kind of really thought or poetry. Next one we can try, create, impart, affirm. So this is interesting. An ethical will, which is called a tza'ah, it's a document meant to impart your wisdom and values to the next generation. So not your stuff, but what you are in here. Oh, hold on. This is my daughter who's pregnant. Hold on. Hey, Han, I'm in the middle of doing a webinar. Are you okay? Okay, I'll call you later. Okay, bye.
Not in labor yet.
Not labor, actually on her way to work.
Okay.
Today, by the way. But if she takes after me, she'll have the baby in October. Anyway, so some wisdom I can impart to my child. There are 3 books in the Bible, Job, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes, and they're called wisdom literature. So you can look through them to find 1 or 2 aphorisms you consider wise, or turn to your favorite information into an affirmation for your cultivation of wisdom. But also, just if you have someone that you would like to impart your wisdom to, it might be interesting to write it down. Just see, what would you say to someone? What would your ethical will contain? Because it's an interesting thought. And this is kind of from the other side. This is Mida, mentor. So when you see or learn from someone you consider wise, there's a blessing to say. We praise you, eternal our God, sovereign of the universe, for giving your wisdom to flesh and blood. That's both for Jewish learning or for secular wisdom, for anything. That's a prayer. It's one of Berachot HaNehanin, one of the blessings of appreciation for just stuff that happens. There's one for thunder and lightning and a rainbow, and because we're Jewish, for wisdom. And then, I love this. It's called Wait. So practice contemplative silence as a means for cultivating wisdom. In your cultivation of the midah of wisdom, try to put into action this teaching from Pirkei Avot. The wise person does not interrupt another's words, does not reply in haste, asks what is relevant, answers to the point, replies to questions in orderly sequence, of what he or she has not heard says, I have not heard, and admits to the truth. This wait stands for why am I talking? So these are really amazing things. I think if everybody did them, we would have much more meaningful conversations.
That would actually be a good place to start your meeting this month.
That is a good point.
2 or 3 minutes of a contemplative silence, and then discuss what did you think about, how did that make you feel, kind of a thing.
That is a
I
great
like that.
idea. I'm actually going to put that in my follow-up email because I think that's a great idea.
I really like that, because we always look for an opening prayer or how to start something, and that's a great way to start this one.
Especially when it's all about learning from other people and listening. That's great. See, I learn more about how to lead these sessions from the people I speak to than I can impart.
I just put that down with big stars on my little book here. Start with that.
Yeah, I just wrote it down. I'm going to put it in the follow-up email too because I think it's really, really good. And then this is really interesting, Lady Wisdom. Jewish wisdom literature consists of the books of Job, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. So a chavruta partner is someone that you study with. With them, you might wish to tackle these texts as a pathway to wisdom. The book of Proverbs personifies wisdom as Lady Wisdom. So let's think about the significance of this since we are all women. And the Midrash on Proverbs even states that wisdom is older than the universe and was God's first creation. So we're talking about wisdom as an entity, which I think is very interesting. It's nice to personify things like that. And I'm really glad that they picked women because I think women on the whole, and I would never, I don't think it's good to do this, but I'm doing it anyway, tend to listen a little bit more and tend to be able to take their egos out of it a little bit more. It's just been my experience.
Well, men want to solve the problem. Women actually listen to the problem.
That's right. That's completely right. When I have problems, I have one particular friend who I love to speak with her. She's like my sister. And I always tell my husband, I'm just going to call Debbie. Like, you know.
Yeah, if you want an answer to a problem, you ask your husband. Otherwise, you ask your girlfriends.
Right. Completely right. So that's Lady Wisdom. And then there's some really interesting additional information here. There's an introductory film about Mussar. And it's really nice. It's the making of a mensch. It's very famous. But when I send this out, you'll be able to click on it and watch it. It's well done. It's very interesting. And there's more information about Mussar in these 3 different sites. And wisdom is one of the 10 sfirot, the emanations of God. And in the Jewish mystical tradition of Kabbalah. So for the tree of life, it's like a physical representation of the sfirot. You can click here. It doesn't really look like a tree, in my opinion, but it's an interesting thing to contemplate all the different parts of it and what they represent. And you can also get some laminated midot cards, the same place that Making of a Mensch is from. The Hebrew word for each midah is on it. And they include great discussion questions, and it's from letitripple.org. The same woman who made an amazing video is part of this also. So I think you'd like that. And then some nice supplemental materials. Super Scholar, the 30 smartest people alive today. So history is peppered with influential geniuses who changed the world, like Socrates and Leonardo da Vinci, Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein. They all had groundbreaking ideas that lived long after their deaths. So following in this tradition, we take a look at 30 of the smartest people who are actually alive today, including accomplished academics, former child prodigies, IQ whizzes, and super sharp young intellectuals with their whole lives ahead of them. That's interesting to look at. And then this other thing, a word to the wise. When I send out the email, I will send you links to these as well, because I see they're not on the, I don't have my book here. I'm writing on an old envelope. Okay, so a word to the wise. A few inspiring wise words that will give you a new perspective on life. There's 29 carefully selected words of wisdom and some of the most powerful and wisest quotes ever written. So I'll send you that. And my favorite example from this, I feel like I should wait for Susan to come back. I've been so conscious of talking fast so that you'll get to work on time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. So I'm going to wait till Susan comes back, though, because I really like this quote.
Okay.
Oh, thank you for waiting. I made a mistake in trying to make something different than a new recipe, and it hasn't. The time didn't work out. I thought it would be finished before.
What are you baking?
Making a cake, but it has fruit in it. It's a fruit kind of.
I tried to make a gluten-free vegan challah for Rosh Hashanah because one of my kids is gluten-free and vegan. It did not work.
Doesn't work.
It looked like sand. It was horrible.
Okay, so what were you saying now? What's
So this is my favorite quote from the Word to the Wise, the selected words of wisdom. It's from Albert Einstein. He said, "If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid." I really like that. Especially, I feel like there's so much pressure on, especially kids today, to like excel in everything. I just think it's a nice quote to remember.
I like that. That's Albert Einstein.
Einstein was a very wise man, not only a brilliant physicist. So.
Right, completely. He had a great outlook on life. So, yeah. So we're at the Q&A section of our thing. I'm glad that you joined. I hope that you found it meaningful, and I hope that your session, Phyllis, will be meaningful with your people.
Oh, I'm sure it is. This is the best thing that we have ever done. In fact, our temple's trying to start a second group because we don't want to add on to ours because 12 or 13 people is enough.
Yeah.
But the people are raving about it. That every one of us is continuing, and every single person that started it has gotten so much out of it.
So that way too. Susan, where do you live? I wonder if we could.
I live in Alexandria, Virginia.
If there was a group near you, would you be interested in?
No, it would be. I don't. The temple or the Jewish community that I belong to. Actually, I go to two. They're both small, non-traditional ones. One's a Reconstructionist one, and there isn't a Mussar. I mean,
I started this group because I wanted to be part of it, and nobody else had one. And so I just put out a flyer and said, anybody interested in trying this? And right away, 10 women answered.
Well,
so it's something to think about. And then it's not a matter of running this every month because we just have every person takes a month and they run it for the group.
Well, it's possible. The problem that I can see is that the people in the group, at least the Reconstructionist one, are mostly working people. They're very busy, or else they're families with kids, and I don't know if they'll have the time to do that. There are not too many people that are older and retired like me.
Well, I'm semi-retired. I'm still working part-time, but 4 of the women in our group are totally retired. 3 of them have young children. We got a huge variety. So what we do is we just meet at 6:30 at night once a month, and once a month they put it on their calendars, and they loved it so much that they all commit to it.
Well, I'll try to make the suggestion, see what happens. You can't.
Yeah, if you need any support, I'm here. But also keep joining our virtual sessions because we can have discussions as well. Remember I was saying.
What I'd like to do is to find another person, a Havruta partner, to really try out some of this with.
Yeah, you can even do it with 2 or 3 people easily.
Yeah, you really can. It doesn't have to be a big number. I was going to say also that I think we do have a group in Alexandria. I think it might, though, be a teen group, but maybe the woman who leads, it's Reconstructionist. I'm not sure. I'm going to look it up and see. And you know what, with my group, I asked one friend, she asked 2 other friends, and we had 8 people like in a minute because we just like expanded. And it was just a group of friends who got together at people's houses, and it was fine. It was good. We also went on for a really long time until I moved. I'm not so near them anymore. I live on a boat now, so.
Are you near any of the hurricanes or anything?
No, I'm in Haverstraw, the northern part of the Hudson right now.
Oh, New York.
Yeah, New York, okay. Right. Yeah, in the Hudson Valley. So it's just drizzling. It's not, I don't think we're going to have any big things.
Well, send the rain our way via pipeline because we are having fires again. Don't have any water at all.
Sorry to hear that.
Well, thank you very much for your for your leading this and offering this. It's very good and enriching that that you can take advantage of this.
I'm really glad. And certainly I'd love to talk more when we have more time. I'm really cognizant of Phyllis needing to get to work.
Yeah.
But we will every month have a webinar. There's also a virtual group forming, Susan, that you might want to take part in where we just talk a little longer about the topics.
Okay, I'm going to bow out because I'm going to get myself ready for work. Okay. Nice talking to you, Susan. Thank you, Nina.
Thanks. Gmar Chatima Tova. Next time I talk to you, be next year.
Thank you. You too. Good luck with the baby. I'm off to my kids in a couple of days for the holiday. So.
Nice. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Bye. So, Susan, it was really nice getting to know you and discussing this with you. And any questions, let me know. I'm going to send a follow-up email with the things we talked about.
Okay. Actually, it would be useful in that follow-up email to put your email or your contact information. So in case I have a specific question or concern, I'll have at least know somebody that I've met at least one time.
Definitely. I'm going to look and see if there's anything in your area also, just in case you want to do it. But please, tune in every time.
Actually, I would prefer to do it in person rather than on online or a virtual way. But I'll just take advantage of whatever is available. But my preference would be personal first.
I will look in your area. You're in Alexandria. I'll see.
Alexandria, Virginia.
Yes, I knew that.
A lot of Alexandrias around, so you got to get the right state.
That's so funny because when I think of Alexandria, I only think of Virginia. I don't know where the other ones are.
Oh, there are.
But I'm an East Coast person. I don't know. So.
Well, thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to, talk to you again.
Okay. Good luck.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.